Hello, welcome to Locked on Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. And on today's episode, we're going to continue our Get to Know the Enemy series by staying in the North and looking at our good friends, the Vancouver Canucks, and kind of see how their offseason is going, and then look forward to the 2022-2023 season. And then this team that's probably going to be in the phrase for a wild card spot. So we're going to be talking about all that and more on today's episode of Locked on Sharks.
You're Locked on Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at Fear the Fin and San Jose Hockey Now. Of course, I want to thank you guys for making us your first listener of the day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube, where we cover the Sharks, your team, every day. But today, we have Justin Pooni on to talk of the Locked On Canucks, to talk about the Canucks and a team that started the last season kind of slow, but then really turned things around. So, Justin, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, JD. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk about the Canucks. Let all your Sharks fans know what's going on up here in Canucks land. The always fun, entertaining Canucks nation, and their lovely takes throughout the summer. And we're in that silly season right now where it's kind of slow, and the fans' minds kind of wander, and my mind wanders as well. So I'm ready to talk about the Canucks and get ready for the next season.
Yeah, so my dog is drinking water right now. The Canucks, who last year, they finished fifth in the Pacific, 92 points. Like I said, just missed out on the playoffs last year, and I think it was because of the crippling start that they had to the season before they, I guess before we get into anything, let's talk, kind of a recap of last year where they, like I said, they had a brutal start to the season. They've cleaned house, right? They hire Bruce Boudreau, comes in, and it's like, oh, wow, this team has actually got good players again.
Yeah, it was a kind of an interesting start to the season. Again, last year, the year previous, that COVID year, the Canucks were hit the hardest out of any team in the league with COVID. And that caused a lot of turmoil within the locker room with management and the coaching staff. And it was kind of unsettled. And then, of course, this last season started. I thought the Canucks were a playoff team, given how the Pacific Division I thought was going to be. I didn't expect the LA Kings to pop off like the way they did, or the Calgary Flames for that matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, they got off to that slow, crippling start where essentially the players just quit on Travis Green and Jim Benning. For lack of better terms, they quit on the coaching staff, and it was time for a change. And a long overchange, especially in the manager side with Jim Benning, who
we have made fun of Jim Benning plenty on this podcast.
Yeah, everybody makes fun of Jim Benning. Yeah. There was some positives during this time, but a lot of negatives, a lot of bad anchor contracts. Of course, they traded 3 anchors for not an anchor, but a contract in Oliver Ekman-Larsson that wasn't resoundingly approved of. But they turned it around. The second half of the year, you saw they turned it around, and you mentioned players performed well. JT Miller had a career year. Bo Horvat scored 30 goals this past season. Elias Pettersson showed why he showed inclinations of being a burgeoning superstar player. Quinn Hughes, almost cracked 70 points this year. And Thatcher Demko solidified himself as a number 1 legitimate goalie. So when I look at this Canucks roster, yes, they didn't make the playoffs. They just missed out. But there's a lot of good things going on in Canucks land, which gives us a reason to have some optimism looking at the season.
Yeah, so let's get into their offseason here. So what do you think was their biggest move of the offseason?
The biggest move, or the biggest, I'm sure a lot of Canucks fans will say their biggest move hasn't happened yet because, of course, they haven't traded JT Miller yet, which majority of the fan base wants JT Miller gone. I've bounced back and forth on that. I've thought, well, he's your best player, been your best player for the last 3 years. What kind of message does that send to a roster that, a lot of their young players, their 3 key young players are entering their prime, and they're looking to win. They don't want to go through another rebuild. So trading away a guy like JT Miller is not the smartest move. But then you look at the other aspect of it where he's going to be 30 years old. He's just coming up a career. You're going to want that big deal where you just saw what Calgary gave Jonathan Huberdeau, an 8-year deal with $10.5 million, which will help them in the short term, but in the long term will not be that good. So Canucks fans are battling with that. But the biggest move, of course, was acquiring Ilya Mikheyev in free agency, giving him a 4-year deal. I thought the term and the dollars were a little bit high, but it's free agency. You're going to overpay for it a bit.
Yep.
But I think Ilya Mikheyev is going to fit in seamlessly with this roster. He's one of the fastest players, probably next to Connor McDavid, one of the fastest players in the NHL. Scored 20-plus goals in Toronto this year in only 50-some-odd games. So he has the scoring prowess. He has the speed. He can play on the penalty kill, which the Canucks desperately needed. And he just solidifies that top 9, which I think, when you look at the Canucks' top 10 forwards, they're really, really good and can stand with anybody in the Pacific Division, even in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and then, of course, the draft, they get one of my favorite guys in the draft, Jonathan Lekkerimäki. If you listen to the Locked on Sharks for a while, I was very high on him as well, and I thought the Eklund-Lekkerimäki pairing, I could watch that for the next 15 years. I'd be really happy. Yeah. But, of course, the Sharks trade down, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, another Swedish sniper to the pipeline is not a bad thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, general manager Patrick Alvin, of course, loves to tap into the Swedish pipeline. Another Elias Pettersson. So, of course, the Canucks have a rich history with Sweden, which is, they look at the history of the Canucks. They've had a great Swede, so hopefully that tradition continues. And, of course, they signed Andrei Kuzmenko, the prize Russian free agent from the KHL, who will be a rookie, even though he's a lot older than a regular rookie. But that was another big win for the new front office for the Vancouver Canucks with Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin.
All right, how would you if you had to give a grade to the Canucks offseason?
Well, if you asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said a B minus, right? They addressed the bottom 6 with Curtis Lazar, Ilya Mikheyev, added Andrei Kuzmenko. I thought they had a really stellar draft. But this whole JT Miller situation is really, they're treading on thin ice right now. Now, are they there's, from all indications and all reports, they're nowhere near a contract extension for JT Miller. They're also nowhere near a trade for JT Miller. And training camp, as you know, is just around the corner. And for those of you that, and all you San Jose Sharks fans out there don't know, Vancouver is probably the hardest market for any NHL player to play in. Montreal, Toronto, New York, Chicago, wherever. Vancouver is a fishbowl. The media is on its players all the time, right? It's been widely known across the NHL that some players think that the media and the fans are way too tough in Vancouver, which, to be fair, we haven't won anything in 50 years. So, of course, we're going to be tough on our players. But I'm very worried about that. And there was the deal at the draft potentially with the Islanders that kind of fell through. We don't know what really happened. New Jersey's kind of moved on. All these suitors have kind of moved on from JT Miller. So I'm worried now about if he comes back and he's still on a 1-year deal, every day he's going to be being asked questions about, well, what's your contract situation like? What's this about? What's this about? Not only is he going to be asked about it, but all of his teammates are going to be asked about it. And it's going to become a distraction. So that, to me, I'm really worried about. So if you asked me 3 weeks ago, I would say a B minus, but right now it's incomplete because I need this massive, massive cloud over the organization to be resolved before training camp starts.
All right, before we continue and get into kind of the 2022-2023 Canucks, let's take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. You guys know BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball. You got NFL training camp right now, so NFL is right around the corner. If you're a degenerate and want to gamble on preseason games, they've got you covered there. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening right now. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so back to the JT Miller thing. I think the Sharks are kind of in a pretty similar situation as well with Timo Meier, who's entering the final year of his contract. Granted, Timo Meier is a lot younger than JT Miller, but I think it's going to be one of those games where they're going to go into the season hoping to re-sign him, and then it might be kind of almost like Tomas Hertl last year, where it was like, are the Sharks going to trade Tomas Hertl? Are they going to keep him? And then right before the trade deadline, the Sharks re-sign Hertl, and you wonder if the Canucks, maybe if the season goes poorly, if then JT Miller is the best player potentially best player available at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, most of the reports happened at this trade deadline that just passed, right? There was all the reports that the Rangers were heavily interested in JT Miller, and if they had acquired him, you don't only got this postseason that just happened, but you also got all of next year. So basically two postseason runs with JT Miller at a relatively cheap cap hit at like 5.2 or 5 and some change, right? Yep. The value ever since then is going to be dropping because you're getting less of JT Miller because you're going to have to pay him. So yep. I agree with you said about the Tomas Hertl, the Timo Meier stuff, but the way I could see it going is the Canucks can either hold on to him, wait until injuries are bound to happen. We just saw Max Pacioretty in Carolina, injures Achilles, he's going to go in LTIR. That open a pathway to Carolina for JT Miller to become be acquired from the Canucks. Carolina, excuse me. Or the Canucks simply hold on to him and use him as their own rental, and they play that risk like the Calgary Flames did with Gaudreau, where we got 1 year left, let's maximize it, let's go for the playoffs, try to make a run, and then see what happens. That to me is not sustainable. I think where the Canucks are right now, they haven't. The glory days of the Sedins are long gone. It's running on almost 10 years since that era has ended. Of course, all you Sharks fans know we, of course, beat you guys in the 2011 Western Conference Finals. No, sorry to rub salt in the wound there, but I think
one of our many playoff failures. Believe me, we have a long list of playoff failures that we could go through.
We have something in common. Yes.
But
when I look at this management group, they've said they want to build this organization the right way, and that's not a quick fix. That's taking its time and building the proper foundation. Does that involve JT Miller? Well, I would hope so, but
it doesn't seem like he fits the timeline, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he fits the timeline or the budget, because as we know, the Canucks are cap strapped. Like they have no money left. Like there is nothing to spend. So I'm very intrigued to see what they do, because, like we said, the defense is the biggest still issue. I know we're going to get into that in a minute, but the defense still needs a lot of work.
Yeah, so I guess what is this team's biggest strengths and weaknesses going into this offseason?
The biggest strength is the forward group. I think as constructed with JT Miller, this forward group, this top 10 or 11 forwards can compete with anybody in the Western Conference. Maybe not Colorado, because the Colorado has that elite talent with McKinnon,
that star power. Yeah,
but the Canucks, we know Elias Pettersson can, play with the best of them. JT Miller's a 100 guy. I'm expecting another big year. I'm expecting a big rebound year from Brock Besser, who just got a new 3-year deal. Dealt with a lot of stuff in his personal life last year, the death of his father, the health of his father. I think Brock Besser comes back this year, refreshed, a clear mind, a clear space. I expect him to have a big year. We know Bo Horvat, who is also going into a contract year this year where he doesn't have an extension, and he is the longest serving Canuck, the Canucks captain, coming off a 30-goal year, where I know a lot of people in Vancouver might not be the biggest Bo Horvat fans, but I think Bo Horvat is a great leader. He's going to need a new deal. Of course, you have Andrei Kuzmenko, Bud Colson, Niels Höglander, Connor Garland. I want to see what Jason Dickinson can do in a second year. And of course, Mikheyev and Curtis Lazar as well. So this forward group is the biggest strength. And if they can click on all cylinders, the Canucks will score goals. The problem is, can they stop teams from scoring goals?
Yeah, so I mean, you have a really nice goalie. It's just the defensive core is kind of, outside out of Hughes, it's kind of
I mean, when you look at it, Tyler Myers and Oliver Ekman-Larsson are very big ticket contracts. It's $6 million for Tyler Myers, 7 point, I think it's 7.
Only $6 million. Come on. That's we're used to the $7, $8, $11.5 million here.
Yeah. So when I
yeah.
exactly who the Erik Karlsson trade, I'm not saying anything, but when I look at the Canucks decor, right, they're not horrible, but they're not adequate, I think, to compete in the Western Conference. You have Quinn Hughes, a guy like, as much as I like Luke Shen, I think he's a great role defenseman. He shouldn't be playing top 4 minutes. Luke Shen should be playing on a bottom pairing or, a 6-7 defenseman, right? Quinn Hughes, we know, if I want to take the next to join those elite ranks, he's not Cale Makar, he's not Victor Hedman. He could be like Adam Fox, right, in that type of realm. So I want to see him take a step to become a more elite defenseman. Tyler Myers, they're not going to be those point producers that they were earlier on in their career, but if they can play an effective shutdown role, they can. So the talk in Canucks is, should the Canucks say Subban? And last week on my show, I said absolutely, because you're going to get a motivated guy in PK Subban who played a couple years in Jersey, which we all know is a wasteland in the NHL right now, where players either go there to die or they leave, and that franchise has gone nowhere in the last couple of years. So he's gone there. It's kind of been hidden. I think if you can get a motivated PK Subban who still is in good shape, right? He has the skills. If he can step in and be a power play guy and kind of, pick up minutes like that, that would be a great fit for the Vancouver Canucks. So there's still options out there. But I don't see a total revamp of this defense core until some of those salaries go come off the books.
All right. What do you think is the best case scenario for the Canucks this year, and what do you think is the worst case scenario?
Best case scenario is they finish second in the Pacific Division. I think Edmonton is clearly the class of the Pacific. I think they're the best team. Of course, they have the 2 best players in the division too. Calgary, yes, they got a Huberdeau on a long-term deal. They got Weegar, but they lost Kachuk and Goudreau, right?
Yep.
And how are those new players going to fit in Daryl Sutter's system? There's going to be a bit of
it's regression coming. There. Yeah, there's a regression coming there.
They're not going to be a 115 point team again. They're going to come back to the pack. How was LA? LA, of course, they shocked everybody last year, but now teams are going to have a book on them. How are they going to fit in? Right? Are they going to live up to because expectations are on them now? How are they going to live up to expectations? So there's an opening for the Canucks to make that leap to become the second seed in the Pacific Division. It'll take a lot of things to go right, but I can definitely see that. The worst case scenario, the team bottoms out and finishes dead last in the division. I think Seattle's gotten better. Of course, Anaheim's got some young talent. They just got John Klingberg, of course. Calgary, like I just mentioned, they did get Huberdeau and Weegar, so they're not going to be that far of a drop-off. They got Kevin Fiala. So all these teams have gotten better. And potentially the season could just JT doesn't get resolved and the team just bottoms out and we finish dead last in the Pacific or second last. As I know you guys are.
Oh, we're gonna be bad. All right. Before we finish up, looking at the Canucks and kind of look at some of the young players and intriguing players, just want to let you guys know, of course, about Locked On NHL. So when you guys are done listening to this show, make sure you guys go check out Locked On NHL. They're doing their division power rankings every Thursday. So make sure you guys go check that out. And yeah, Locked On NHL, wherever you get podcasts, and of course on YouTube. Okay, so which player do you think is most likely to make a big jump this year?
Vasily Podkolzin. Of course, he's entering his second year. And not so much on the ice. He scored, he showed he can score some goals, right? But I loved what I saw. It's very hard for Russian players who come from a totally different environment, coming to North America, in the North American game, the North American culture. Vasily Podkolzin came into this past season, showed not only he has the skill set to be an everyday top 6 NHL player, but also off the ice. Every one of his teammates said, this kid understands it. He's the first one in the gym, first one on the ice, last one. He's the hardest worker, and he's learning. By the end of the year, he was trying to do interviews without a translator, trying to speak English. And to me, that is a huge step that this kid wants to be an everyday NHL player, wants to establish himself in the NHL. And I think having now 2 other Russians on the team in Ilya Mikheyev and Andrei Kuzmenko will give him, not just all three of them, a sense of comfort. And I think it'll make him feel understand the game where I expect another big leap from Vasily Podkolzin this season.
And any rookies we need to keep an eye on? I know you guys are pretty kind of tapped out, but yeah.
Andrei Kuzmenko. Rookies? I think that's everybody who we want to see. Of course, he's was the hottest free agent kind of before free agency started. Of course, he went on that. He traveled across North America, every different team. The Woo ship. They all took meetings with everybody. It was Vancouver. Bruce Boudreau, Jim Rutherford, and Patrick Allvin all left an impression on this young man, and he chose to be in Vancouver. So I want to see if he lives to the hype and how he fits in the Canucks roster, and how he adapts to the NHL game.
As a Sharks fan, of course, we had the Dahlin for Linus Karlsson swap a couple of years ago, and the Sharks fans thought they won this trade until now. Dahlin is no longer with the team. Linus Karlsson, is he going to be? I know he's been playing well in Sweden. Is he going to be coming over soon?
From all indications I've heard, I don't think Linus will be over just yet
this year.
Potentially, the Canucks need some help in their farm team in Abbotsford. So you never know. After the Swedish season, they might bring him over. But I think from all indications, what I've been told, what I've been reading, is that they want to let him to continue to develop in Sweden, which with a lot of their young Swedes, they're just going to let them develop in Sweden. And when they feel ready, they will bring them over to North America. Of course, the Canucks have kind of revamped their entire player development staff. Of course, the Sedins now are on ice role at that. They have Mikael Samuelsson, who will be in Sweden with these players. So I think having those players that have been through those battles, working with these young players will just be another beneficial factor for these young Canucks as they come up through the systems and the ranks to potentially make an impact in Vancouver.
All right, the big question: where do the Canucks finish in the Pacific this year?
So I have the Canucks finishing 4th in the Pacific Division behind Calgary. I did have before they signed Huberdeau. The Canucks finishing 4th in the Pacific Division, but making the playoffs as a wild team this year. I think the Canucks will make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, everybody's down on Vegas this year. I get it, but at the same time, I'm also like, Eichel and Stone is pretty good.
Yeah, they're definitely. I definitely agree with you on that, but
they just have no depth. Like they can't get hurt. Like nobody can get hurt.
Exactly. And you, as you all know, Sharks fans know too. When you in hockey, it's a marathon of a season. You're gonna get injuries, right? And when you don't have that depth, especially up front or on the back end, you're not gonna be successful. And just all this noise around Vegas this offseason is not. It left a negative cloud over that organization. So I think they will be in the thick of it. They will be in the thick of it. But I think the Canucks finish 4th, and I think the Canucks do make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Canucks are going to be right there too. With Vegas, again, there's a lot of just bad vibes coming from them, where it's just like just the way they treat their players and stuff, and we as Sharks fans have seen this, right? I mean, if you go back to the 2018-2019 season where it was like, okay, they all in for the Sharks, right? They get to the Western Conference Finals, and then you start losing that depth because you got to pay players and stuff like that. And you just start chipping away, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out. And I'm not saying Vegas is going to, the bottom's going to fall out, but I'm also not saying that the bottom.
I think this season is huge for Vegas because they just got Jack Eichel, who wants to win. He's been dying in Buffalo for to be in a winning organization. They got Bruce Cassidy, who is a good coach from Boston. There's no denying about that. But he has, there's been issues that he's had with certain players in Boston that have now come out after he's left. So how does he ingratiate himself in that locker room? How does Vegas? Because there's pressure. Their owner Bill Foley wants to win. He's an aggressive guy, and he's been aggressive since day one. So how does Vegas bounce back after a injury-riddled season? And they've been giving away players for next to nothing because they have no cap.
Or nothing, so, literally nothing.
Literally nothing, exactly. Literally nothing. So I'm interested to see what Vegas does. I think if I was to put money on it, I would say the Canucks and Vegas both get the wild card spot. But you never know. You got to play the games, see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think it's just going to show how much better the Pacific is this year compared to what we've seen in the past couple of years, where it was literally Vegas's division and everybody else was kind of fighting for the second, third spots and stuff. But yeah, I think the wild card, the Western or the Pacific will definitely have at least one wild card representative. I still think the Central is pretty solid too. With you got Colorado, you got Minnesota,
Colorado,
Dallas, Nashville. Yeah, they're all going to be in there. So
I don't know about Dallas. I think Dallas, Winnipeg, kind of stuck in no man's land. Nashville's gotten a bit better. So it's gonna be a fight, as it is every year in the West, to see who gets those playoff spots. But
the nice thing for them is those guys get to also play Chicago a bunch, who's going to be terrible, and they get to play Arizona, is also going to be bad. So you get some easy points there. Well, I guess the Sharks are the doormat of the Pacific, but there's not as many easy points in the Pacific, I think, as there was.
Definitely not this year. No, especially what the Seattle's done.
I think Seattle's gonna be a lot better, man. That Beniers, right down the middle to start the franchise is pretty solid.
Shane Wright, they got Bjorkstrand from Columbus. They got Burakovsky. They have some nice pieces now in Seattle. So it's gonna be a very exciting season, and it's right around the corner, and I can't wait.
Yes, Justin, where can the people find you in the show?
So you can find me at _Process Sports on Twitter, my own personal account. You can also follow our show on Twitter at Locked On Canucks. Please also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just type in Locked On Canucks on YouTube, and it'll be the first hit on there. I want to thank you, JD, for having me on. I hope we can do this again during the season. Talk to some Canucks and Sharks talk. I think that's always fun. It was great to talk and fill in your listeners about what's going on. Just up the I-5, a little bit further distance up the I-5 up to us in Vancouver.
Yep. Yes, and of course you can find Locked On Sharks Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, and then of course listen wherever you get podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Odyssey. You can subscribe on YouTube as well. We appreciate all those. Make sure again go check out Justin over at Locked On Canucks. Make sure you guys go check out the Locked On NHL podcast. They're still pumping out 5 episodes a week, even though we have gone down to 3. And again, make sure you guys come back next week. Brandon Coe, Sharks Prospect of the Year, going to be on mid next week. So, got a good one with him coming up. So, Justin, thanks, buddy.
Thanks, JD.